Ethan woke up suddenly. The room was dark, but something felt off. His instincts screamed at him, telling him that he wasn't alone. His breathing slowed as his eyes adjusted to the dim glow of the city lights outside the window. Then he saw her. Zyra, his alien roommate, was sitting on the edge of his bed, completely still. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and her sharp, almost feline features were tense. Her normally flawless silver-blue skin had an odd shimmer to it, as if she was ready to activate some kind of defensive ability. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. "Zyra, what the hell are you doing?" he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze flicked toward the corner of the room, where nothing should have been. Then she spoke in a voice so low it made his skin crawl. "Someone's here." Ethan's blood turned ice cold. He sat up, scanning the room, but he saw nothing. His apartment had the latest security system. If someone had broken in, alarms would have gone off. Yet, Zyra looked dead serious. Before he could question her further, the lights flickered. Not just once. They flickered in a pattern. On, off, on, off. Long, short, short. Morse code. Ethan wasn't an expert, but he knew enough to understand the message. Run. His chest tightened. Then, without warning, his security system blared. A robotic voice filled the room. Intrusion DTTCTED. Unauthorized. Presence DTTCTE. Ethan's stomach dropped. He wasn't alone. Something was inside the room with them. A sharp gust of air rushed past his face, and Zyra moved like lightning. She grabbed his arm and yanked him out of bed just as a blade slashed through the space where his neck had been. Adrenaline hit him like a freight train. He stumbled but managed to catch himself, eyes darting toward the source of the attack. But there was no one there. Then, a shimmer. A cloaked figure, barely visible, outlined by the flickering light. Ethan felt his heart hammering as the air itself seemed to ripple around them. It was like looking at a distortion in reality, something camouflaged so perfectly that it was almost invisible. Almost. Zyra's eyes narrowed. She raised her hand, and suddenly her skin pulsed with energy. A high-pitched sound filled the room, and the cloaked figure glitched, flickering in and out of visibility. A bounty hunter. Ethan had no time to process how or why. They had to move. Zyra pulled him toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The figure wasn't alone. A second presence lurked in the shadows. And they weren't here to talk. Part 2. The Hunter in the Shadows. The first attacker lunged again, moving faster than any human could. Zyra barely managed to counter, her daggers flashing in the dim light. Sparks flew as metal clashed against alien alloys. Ethan had no weapon, just his instincts. Thinking fast, he reached for his nightstand and grabbed the only thing within reach, a high-powered flashlight. It was a dumb idea, but it worked. He flicked it on, shining the beam directly where the second figure lurked. The cloaking device flickered for a split second, revealing something inhuman. A cybernetic assassin, half machine, half alien. Its skin was stitched with metal plates, its eyes a soulless red glow. It let out a low mechanical growl before surging forward. Ethan barely ducked in time. "Zyra," he shouted. She was already moving. With a snarl, she launched herself into the air, flipping over the first assassin and landing behind it. With a quick slash of her plasma dagger, she cut through its cloaking device, forcing it to become fully visible. Ethan saw it clearly now. Black armor, smooth like obsidian, with glowing veins of orange energy. The first assassin stumbled, but the second one was still coming. Zyra was outnumbered, and Ethan was helpless. Or so they thought, because he had an idea. And it was crazy enough to work. Part 3. The Escape Plan. Ethan reached toward the wall panel, hacking into his own apartment's security system. If he could override the lockdown. The second assassin lunged. Too fast. Too strong. But not fast enough. Because Zyra grabbed Ethan and flipped them both over the couch, just as the assassin's blade missed them by inches. We need to go. Now. Ethan's fingers flew across the touchpad. The override worked. The doors hissed open. They bolted. But so did the assassins. The chase was on. Part 4. The high-speed chase. They ran through the corridors, alarms blaring. Security drones activated, but before they could interfere, the assassins cut through them like paper. Zura grabbed Ethan's wrist. We need a ride. Ethan didn't argue. They burst onto the rooftop. The city stretched before them. Neon lights, flying vehicles, endless skyscrapers. Behind them, the assassins weren't slowing down. Zyra's eyes flashed. Jump. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. What? She grabbed him. Trust me. Then they leaped. Part 5. A new beginning. But at what cost? A stolen speeder, a mad chase through the night, explosions behind them. A city that would never be safe for them again. As they escaped into orbit, Ethan looked at Zyra. What the hell was that about? She hesitated. Then she said the one thing that changed everything. There's a bounty on my head. The Galactic Council wants me dead. Ethan's breath caught. And now? She looked out the window. Now, they want you dead too. Part 6. The ultimate revelation. Powerful ending. Their stolen ship entered deep space, but just as Ethan thought they were free, a massive fleet appeared on the scanners. Ships. Too many to count. A message came through. Surrender the auxiliary traitor, or be destroyed. Ethan turned to Zura. She met his gaze. Hope you can fight, she said. Ethan smirked. Let's give them a reason to fear us. To be continued. Ethan's heart pounded like a drum as he struggled to make sense of what was happening. The dim glow from the city lights outside barely illuminated the room, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own. The security alarm continued to blare in the background, but his mind was too focused on survival to care. Zyra had just pulled him away from a near-fatal strike, and now they were trapped with two unseen killers lurking in the darkness. The air around them felt heavy, like an unseen presence was pressing against his chest. Zyra's body was tense, her glowing violet eyes scanning the room with precision. Ethan couldn't see anything, but she could. Her senses were far sharper than his. She knew exactly where their attackers were. Before he could ask, the first assassin struck again. A blur of movement, silent, fast, and deadly. Zyra reacted instantly, twisting her body to deflect the incoming attack. The clash of metal on metal sent sparks flying in the darkness, revealing the faint outline of their attacker. Ethan barely had time to register what he was looking at. The figure was humanoid but not human. It wore a sleek black suit, lined with glowing orange veins that pulsed like liquid fire. Its face was obscured by a high-tech mask, and the only thing visible was the faint shimmer of its cloaking device, struggling to keep up with its rapid movements. Zara countered with a precise slash of her plasma dagger, aiming for its throat, but the assassin was just as fast. It twisted away at the last second, vanishing into the darkness once more. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. How were they supposed to fight something they couldn't even see? His mind raced for a solution. His apartment had a built-in security system, but would it even work against these things? Then his eyes flicked toward his nightstand. The flashlight. It was a long shot, but he had no other weapon. Ethan lunged for it, grabbed the device, and flicked it on. A beam of harsh white light cut through the darkness, sweeping across the room. For a split second, he saw it. The second assassin. Unlike the first, this one was not wearing a mask. Its skin was a mix of flesh and cold, gleaming metal. Half of its face was cybernetic, red artificial eyes glowing menacingly in the dark. It wasn't just an assassin. It was a machine. The biomechanical killer built for one purpose: elimination. Ethan barely had time to process the sight before the thing moved. It lunged at him with terrifying speed, its metallic claws extending from its fingertips like razor-sharp blades. Ethan had no time to dodge, but Zyra did. In a blink, she threw herself between them, her dagger meeting the assassin's metal claws with a loud, echoing clash. Sparks erupted as the two locked in a deadly struggle, Zyra's muscles straining against the machine's unnatural strength. "Move," she shouted. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rolled out of the way just as the machine swung again, its clawed hand slicing through the air where he had been a second ago. He scrambled to his feet, heart racing. They couldn't keep fighting like this. They were outnumbered, and their enemies were faster, stronger, and invisible. They needed an escape plan. Fast. He turned toward the control panel on his wall. If he could override the lockdown, they could get out of here. His fingers flew across the interface, bypassing the system's security protocols. But just as he was about to hit the final comment, a cold voice echoed through the room. "That was a mistake, human." Ethan froze. The second assassin was speaking. Its voice was mechanical, emotionless, but it carried a sense of amusement. Zyra stiffened, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You should not have interfered," the assassin continued. "Your life was insignificant before. Now, you are a target." Ethan's jaw clenched. He wasn't going to let some machine decide his fate. With one final tap on the panel, he activated the override. The doors hissed open. Zyra reacted instantly. She grabbed Ethan's wrist and yanked him toward the exit, moving with inhuman speed. The assassins lunged after them. But for a brief moment, the sudden flood of hallway lights disrupted their cloaking devices. Their figures shimmered and became fully visible. Ethan's stomach twisted. The first assassin was sleek, agile, and clearly built for speed. The second one, however, was something else entirely. It was taller, its limbs reinforced with cybernetic plating. Its right arm wasn't even organic. It was a fully functional plasma cannon, glowing menacingly as it charged up. Ethan didn't wait to see what would happen next. He sprinted. Zyra was already ahead of him, leading the way through the corridors of the apartment complex. The sound of metal feet pounding against the floor behind them sent a jolt of fear through Ethan's spine. They were being hunted. Zyra took a sharp turn and smashed her fist against the emergency stairwell door, forcing it open. They raced down the steps, taking 2, 3 at a time. The assassins weren't far behind. Ethan's lungs burned, but he pushed forward. Then, a blast of blue plasma shot past his head. It missed by inches, hitting the wall beside them. The concrete exploded, sending shards of debris flying in all directions. Ethan ducked, shielding his face as he stumbled forward. Zyra cursed under her breath. "They're done playing around." Ethan didn't need her to tell him that. They burst onto the parking level, where dozens of hoverbikes and speeders were lined up. "Do you know how to drive one of these?" Ethan asked, panting. Zyra's lips curled into a smirk. "Better than you." She ran to the nearest speeder, pressed her palm against the interface, and hacked into the system within seconds. The vehicle roared to life. "Get in." Ethan didn't argue. He jumped onto the back just as the assassins emerged from the stairwell. The cybernetic killer raised its plasma cannon. Too late. Zyra hit the throttle. The speeder shot forward like a bullet, tearing out of the parking garage and into the neon-lit cityscape. The night sky stretched before them, filled with floating highways and countless other vehicles. Behind them, the assassins weren't giving up. Ethan looked back and felt his stomach drop. They were following. Not on foot, they had their own vehicles. Sleek black hoverbikes, built for combat, their engines glowing with unnatural energy. Zyra cursed. "Hold on tight." Ethan barely had time to grab onto her before she made a sharp, impossible turn, weaving between speeding traffic at breakneck speed. The city lights blurred past them as they darted through the sky, dodging obstacles with inhuman precision. But the assassins weren't slowing down. One of them raised a weapon. Ethan's eyes widened. Incoming. A plasma shot whizzed past, narrowly missing their speeder. The heat from the blast was enough to make Ethan's skin prickle. Zara gritted her teeth. "They really don't want me alive," she muttered. Ethan swallowed. "Yeah, well, I'd appreciate it if we both stayed that way." Zara's fingers tightened around the controls. "Then hold on," she said. She slammed her foot down. The speeder shot forward, disappearing into the depths of the city. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The wind roared past them as the speeder tore through the neon-lit cityscape. Ethan clung tightly to Zara, his arms wrapped around her waist as she maneuvered the vehicle with precision. The assassins were right behind them, their sleek black hoverbikes cutting through the night like shadows given form. Another plasma shot streaked past, barely missing their speeder. Ethan flinched as the heat brushed against his skin. These assassins weren't just hunting Zara anymore. They were hunting him too. "They're gaining on us," Ethan shouted over the wind. Zara gritted her teeth, her glowing violet eyes locked on the traffic ahead. The floating highways were packed with other speeders, automated drones, and cargo haulers, all moving in synchronized chaos. One wrong move and they'd crash into an oncoming vehicle at full speed. "I need to lose them," she muttered. Ethan glanced back. The assassins were relentless, weaving through traffic with deadly precision. The one with the cybernetic face was preparing another shot, the plasma cannon on its arm charging with a faint hum. Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't keep dodging forever. They needed a way to shake these killers off their trail, permanently. His eyes darted to the skyline, searching for anything that could give them an advantage. Then he saw it. A sprawling industrial complex ahead, its towering structures covered in flashing warning signs. A construction zone. "There," Ethan pointed. "Take us through there." Zara hesitated for half a second before nodding. She yanked the controls hard to the left, sending the speeder into a sharp dive toward the construction site. The moment they entered, the noise of the city faded, replaced by the heavy rumble of machinery and the flickering glow of welding sparks. Enormous cranes swung massive steel beams across the open sky, while automated loaders carried tons of construction materials through the air. The entire site was a metallic maze of death traps. Zara twisted the speeder through narrow gaps between towering scaffolding and half-finished structures, her reflexes lightning fast. Ethan's heart pounded as he ducked beneath a swinging steel beam that came inches from decapitating him. But their pursuers weren't slowing down. The cybernetic assassin fired again, the plasma shot obliterating a construction drone near them, sending burning debris scattering in all directions. "They won't stop," Zara growled. "We need to do more than just run." Ethan's eyes narrowed. If they couldn't escape, then they had to turn the construction site against them. He scanned the area, searching for anything they could use. Then he spotted it, a massive overhead crane carrying several tons of steel beams. The controls were mounted on a floating platform nearby. "Zara, get me to that crane," Ethan yelled. She didn't question him. With a sudden burst of speed, she angled the speeder toward the control platform. Ethan braced himself as they skidded to a halt just long enough for him to leap off. His feet hit the platform hard, and he nearly stumbled, but there was no time to recover. Zara veered away instantly, drawing the assassin's fire as she sped deeper into the construction site. Plasma shots burned through the air, narrowly missing her. Ethan turned to the crane's control panel. It was old, not fully automated, meaning he could override it manually. He grabbed the controls and swung the massive crane arm. The steel beams hanging from it swayed dangerously. He had to time this perfectly. The assassins didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. As they sped after Zara, Ethan released the load. Several tons of steel came crashing down. One of the assassins veered out of the way at the last second, but the cybernetic killer, wasn't so lucky. The beams slammed into its hoverbike, sending it spiraling out of control. The last thing Ethan saw was the machine's red eyes flashing before it vanished in an explosion of fire and metal. One down. But the second assassin was still after Zyra. Ethan turned just in time to see Zyra leap off her speeder. For a moment, he thought she had lost control, until he realized she had done it on purpose. Her speeder, now unmanned, shot forward and collided directly with the assassin's hoverbike. The explosion lit up the night sky, sending flaming wreckage plummeting into the depths of the city below. Silence. Then, Zyra landed gracefully on a steel platform just feet away from Ethan. She looked at him, breathing heavily. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion, but also something else. Respect. You actually killed one of them, she said. Ethan let out a shaky breath. Yeah, guess I did. Zyra studied him for a long moment before nodding. Not bad for a human. Ethan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. His adrenaline was still surging, but the realization was starting to hit him. He had just fought for his life against an alien assassin, and somehow he had won. But then his communicator beeped. He frowned and pulled the small device from his pocket. It was a secure channel, one that only a handful of people had access to. A distorted voice came through. Ethan Carter, we need to talk. His blood ran cold. Zyra stepped closer, her expression darkening. Who is that? Ethan's grip tightened around the communicator. Someone I haven't heard from in a long time, he murmured. The voice spoke again. Meet me at the abandoned docks. 1 hour. Come alone. Then the line cut off. Ethan exhaled sharply, his mind racing. Whoever it was, they had waited until now to reach out. That meant they knew exactly what had just happened. Zyra crossed her arms. Are you going? Ethan hesitated. This could be a trap. But at the same time, it could be the only lead they had. The assassins were dead, but that didn't mean the danger was over. Whoever sent them was still out there. And Ethan wanted answers. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I'm going. Zyra's eyes narrowed. Then I'm going with you. Ethan looked at her. They said to come alone. Zyra smirked. And do you always do what you're told? Ethan sighed, shaking his head with a small smile. He should have known better. Fine, he said. Let's see what they want. Without another word, the two of them disappeared into the city, heading toward their next destination. But deep down, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The night was alive with flashing neon lights, casting a glow over the towering skyscrapers as Ethan and Zyra weaved through the dark alleys of the city. The air was thick with tension. Ethan could still feel the weight of the communicator in his pocket, the cryptic message repeating in his head. Someone had been watching them. Someone who knew exactly where they were. And now, they were heading straight toward whoever it was. The docks weren't far now. Just a few more turns, and they'd be out of the dense city traffic. But then, the sound of engines roared behind them. Ethan glanced back, his heart dropping. A squad of black hoverbikes emerged from the sky, their sleek designs cutting through the air like silent predators. Their riders wore the same dark armor as the assassins they had fought earlier. More were coming. They just don't give up, Ethan muttered. Zyra's grip tightened on the speeder's controls. Hold on. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, she slammed the accelerator. The speeder lurched forward with a burst of speed, its engines glowing bright blue as it shot between the towering buildings. The force nearly threw Ethan off, but he gritted his teeth and held on. The assassins were fast, but Zyra was faster. She twisted the vehicle through narrow gaps between skyscrapers, dodging glowing billboards and soaring past transport drones. The city became a blur. Ethan's breath was caught in his throat. The sheer speed was overwhelming, and every turn felt like they were inches from crashing into a solid wall of steel and glass. They're still following us, Ethan shouted over the rushing wind. Zyra didn't answer. Instead, she suddenly pulled the speeder into a dive. Ethan's stomach flipped. The world spun as they plummeted downward at a terrifying speed, heading straight for a moving hover train below. The train was gliding along its magnetic tracks, carrying cargo and passengers through the city's lower levels. "Zyra, what are you doing?" "Trust me," she said. Ethan barely had time to process what was happening before Zyra jerked the controls, leveling the speeder out just in time. They were now flying parallel to the hover train, just a few meters above its roof. Ethan risked a glance back. The assassins had followed them into the dive, but they weren't as smooth. One misjudged the angle and slammed into the side of the train, vanishing in a fiery explosion. But the others were still coming. Zyra narrowed her eyes. "We need to lose them, permanently." Ethan scanned their surroundings, looking for anything they could use. The train was heading toward a maintenance tunnel, its entrance marked by a flashing red sign. A plan clicked in his mind. "The tunnel," he said. "Get us inside, then cut the engines at the last second." Zyra understood immediately. Without hesitation, she guided the speeder toward the train's open cargo section, a massive gap between two cars. The timing had to be perfect. If they miscalculated, they'd be crushed between the train cars. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead. Seconds remained. Ethan held his breath. Then, they shot inside. The moment they were within the dark confines of the tunnel, Zyra killed the engine. The speeder went silent, losing its bright glow as it drifted into the shadows. They coasted along in near total darkness, nothing but the faint hum of the train beneath them. Behind them, the assassins didn't realize the trick until it was too late. They zoomed into the tunnel at full speed, their glowing engines making them easy targets. And then, a security barrier slammed down. The tunnel's automated defenses activated, registering unauthorized high-speed movement. Steel barriers dropped from the ceiling. The assassins barely had time to react. One tried to stop, but his hoverbike collided with the wall, sending him spiraling into oblivion. Another attempted to shoot through the barrier, but the reinforced plating was too strong. One by one, they were wiped out. Ethan exhaled as he watched the last explosion flicker out behind them. They were safe. For now. Zyra restarted the speeder's engines, now keeping them at a low power setting to avoid detection. She guided them through a hidden maintenance exit at the end of the tunnel, emerging into a quiet industrial zone near the docks. The chase was over, but something told Ethan the real danger was just beginning. They had made it. Now, it was time to meet the person who had called him. The industrial zone was eerily quiet, with only the distant hum of machinery breaking the silence. The air smelled of oil and metal, and the dim glow of streetlights cast long shadows over the empty loading docks. Ethan and Zyra stepped off the speeder, their bodies still tense from the chase. Ethan pulled out the communicator, its screen flickering with a single message, Dock 17. Alone. "Do we trust this?" Ethan asked, looking at Zyra. She sighed, scanning their surroundings. "We don't have a choice. If someone knows about us, about the assassins, then they might have answers. But we go in ready for anything." Ethan nodded, gripping the stolen plasma pistol he had taken earlier. Together, they moved through the quiet docking area, their steps light and cautious. The massive ships stationed nearby loomed like sleeping giants, their hulls reflecting the dim lights from above. Dock 17 was at the far end of the port, an isolated bay with a single starship docked. A sleek black vessel, much smaller than the cargo haulers surrounding it. As they approached, a shadow stepped forward from the ship's open hatch. A tall, hooded figure. Ethan tightened his grip on the pistol. "Who are you?" The figure remained silent for a moment before pulling back their hood. It was a woman. Human. Short, platinum blonde hair framed a face marked by years of hardship. Her piercing green eyes studied them carefully. "My name is Celine," she said, her voice steady. "And I know why they're hunting you." Zyra's expression hardened. "Then start talking." Celine glanced around before stepping back, motioning for them to follow. "Not here. Inside." We don't have much time. Ethan hesitated, but Zyra was already moving. With one last glance over his shoulder, Ethan followed her into the ship. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old electronics and engine grease. The dimly lit control room was cluttered with holoscreens and tactical maps. Celine tapped a console, and the ship's doors sealed shut behind them. She turned to face them. You two just made powerful enemies. Those assassins, they weren't just hired guns. They were sentinels. Zyra tensed. Ethan frowned. Never heard of them. Celine exhaled sharply. Because no one talks about them in lives. They're the Galactic Syndicate's secret enforcers, and right now their orders are simple: eliminate you both. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Why us? Celine's gaze flickered toward Zyra. Not just you. Her. Zyra crossed her arms. They've been after me for years. This isn't new. Celine shook her head. It is now. The Syndicate isn't just hunting you anymore. They declared war on your entire species. Silence filled the room. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What? Celine activated a holoscreen, displaying a live news feed. The screen showed an emergency broadcast from the Galactic Council. A severe-looking alien in regal attire addressed the galaxy. By unanimous decree, the Xylari species is hereby classified as a rogue civilization. Their presence in Syndicate-controlled territories is now a direct threat. Any individual found aiding them will be treated as an enemy of the Council. Ethan's stomach dropped. The ship landed smoothly on the barren moon's surface, hidden behind jagged rock formations. As soon as the hatch opened, cold air rushed in, carrying the faint hum of distant machinery. Ethan, Zyra, and Celine moved quickly, navigating the rocky terrain until they reached a rusted service hatch. Celine pried it open, revealing a narrow tunnel leading into the facility. "This is where I leave you," she said. Ethan frowned. "You're not coming." Celine smirked. "I got you this far. Now it's your fight." Zyra nodded, stepping inside. "Then let's end this." The tunnel was dark and cramped, the air thick with dust. They moved fast, their footsteps echoing softly. After several minutes, they reached a metal door. Zyra placed a small device against the lock. A moment later, the door hissed open. Beyond it lay a massive hangar, and in the center of it, the Ark-class battleship. Ethan whistled. "She's beautiful." The ship was sleek, its dark hull lined with glowing blue circuits. It was larger than anything Ethan had ever piloted, but right now, it was their only hope. Zyra moved toward the entrance, but before she could reach it, alarms blared, red lights flashed, and a robotic voice echoed through the hangar. Unauthorized access detected. Security lockdown engaged. Doors slammed shut, and from the far side of the hangar, figures emerged. Sentinels. Ethan cursed. Of course, it couldn't be easy. The sentinels moved in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the red lights. Their leader stepped forward, a tall figure in jet-black armor, his face obscured by a helmet. "Zyra of the Xylari," he said, his voice distorted. "You will surrender." Zyra raised her rifle. Not a chance. The lead sentinel tilted his head. So be it. The battle erupted in an instant. Zyra fired first, plasma bolts slicing through the air. Ethan dove for cover, returning fire as sentinels closed in. The room exploded with energy as shots ricocheted off metal walls. Zyra moved like lightning, dodging blasts and taking down enemies with deadly precision. Ethan covered her, firing at anything that got too close. But more sentinels poured in. "We're outnumbered," Ethan shouted. Zyra pointed to the ship. "We just have to reach the controls." They pushed forward, fighting through the chaos. Ethan took down a sentinel at close range, while Zyra leaped onto a platform, taking out two more. Finally, they'd reached the ship's entrance. Zyra slammed her hand against the access panel, and the door slid open. "Get in," she yelled. Ethan jumped inside, sprinting to the cockpit. He scanned the controls, hands flying over the console. The ship's AI activated, a cool female voice echoing through the speakers. Arc-class battleship online, awaiting command. Zara ran inside, sealing the doors behind her. Go, go, go. Ethan hit the ignition. The ship rumbled beneath them, engines roaring to life. The hangar shook as the ship's thrusters engaged. Outside, the Sentinels tried to stop them, but it was too late. The Arc-class battleship rose. Ethan grabbed the controls. Hold on. The ship blasted through the hangar doors, tearing through steel and fire. Explosions erupted behind them as they soared into space. Alarms blared across the Syndicate outpost as warships turned to intercept. Ethan's heart pounded. Here they come. Zyra strapped in. Let's see what this thing can do. The Syndicate warships opened fire, but the Arc-class battleship moved like a phantom. It vanished into stealth mode, reappearing behind them in an instant. Ethan grinned. Oh, I like this ship. Zyra smirked. Now let's make them regret everything. The ship's weapons lit up. Laser cannons fired, missiles launched, and the Syndicate's mighty fleet crumbled under their assault. One by one, enemy ships exploded, torn apart by the very weapon they had feared for so long. And then, just like that, it was over. The battlefield was silent. Zara stared at the wreckage. We did it. Ethan exhaled, gripping the controls. Yeah, but this is just the start. Zyra turned to him, eyes burning with determination. Then let's finish what they started. The Arc-class battleship turned, disappearing into the stars. A war had begun. And this time, humanity and the Xylari would fight together.